This code executes one time, but sometimes we want code to execute multiple times. And an effective way to do that, when you want code to execute several times, instead of repeating the code, you can write the code one time and then put it in a function and call that function multiple times. So JavaScript has functions, and you can see here what a function looks like. It has the keyword function, then a function name, and in parentheses some parameters. You can have 0 or more parameters. Each parameter is separated by a comma. And then there's the opening curly brace and the closing curly brace. And then whatever code you want executed when that function is called goes inside here. In this case, it only has a single line, but you can have a function with many lines of code. It also uses the keyword return, and return returns a value from the function to wherever it was called from. And in this case, it's returning a computation. That's not truly what it's doing. What it happens is order of executions has it do this computation first. That computation will result in a single value, and then that value is returned. So that's how functions work in JavaScript. Now, to get a function to execute, you call it. So here is a function 2 Celsius, and it has one parameter, Fahrenheit, and that parameter is used inside the function, and then computation is done and the value is returned. And here you see a way to call it. And the way you call it is with the name of the function and then parentheses, and inside the parentheses any value you need to send. And here it's being called, and then it's using the return value to update the inner HTML of an element. There are other ways to use a function call. For example, here a function is called and the value that's returned is stored in a variable. Here the value of the function call is actually in the middle of a string concatenation. So it will call this function and that value will be returned. Now this is returning a numeric value. So what will happen is this string will be concatenated with this number. This number will be converted to a string and they will be concatenated together. That will result in a single string, and then it will be added to this string. So those strings will be concatenated and you'll end up with a single string here, right? And it starts with this function call returning a numeric value and that numeric value being converted to a string so that it can be concatenated. So this is how functions work. Now we're going to want to call this code over and over again because we really want it to update. Remember what it's doing. It's updating the current day and time here, and it's updating the number of days, hours, minutes, and seconds until New Year's. So we're going to want this to execute over and over again. Not every time somebody reloads it, and they say, oh, I want to see what it is now, I'll reload it, I want to see it is now. We want it to change automatically over and over. So we're going to call this code multiple times. So to make this efficient, let's go ahead and use a function. So do the keyword function, and then for the name, let's see what we're going to call this. We're going to call this run clock. And we actually don't need any parameters. So there's no information that needs to be set when this function is called. Now you'll see that my editor, when I started this function, it automatically added the opening and closing curly braces. I'm going to need those, but they're not quite in the right place. I need all of this code to be inside there. So two ways to do that. I can copy all this code, cut all this code and paste it in there, or I can cut the curly brace, and paste it down here at the very bottom. So either way you do that, go ahead and get all of that code inside the function curly braces. Now, another good strategy is to indent to be able, this improves readability, so we can look at it directly and see, oh, here's a function and here's all the code that's inside that function. All that code is indented one level. We see the opening curly brace and the closing curly brace and the indented code. All right. Now we save it and we've actually put that inside a function. That's pretty cool. Now when we refresh the page, now I want you to look at these numbers, okay, and let's see what happens. Oh, look at where we're at. We're back to the original, what was there originally, right? When we started with this starter code that was supplied by the textbook, it has these dates in there originally. what this means, and all of these were already there. So this is just what came with our original starter code. What that means is none of this is executed. So we put this inside a function and all of a sudden it doesn't run. So when we load this page, what happens? Well, we load this page, same thing happens. It gets to here, it defers any JavaScript running till it loads the page. So it loads the page, then it goes back to run the JavaScript, and whatever's in a function doesn't happen on load. A function is executed when it is called. And this function is never called, so it's never executed. So now we've been able to create code that doesn't execute on load. So there, maybe that's a win, maybe not. So if we want this to run, we actually have to call it. So we can go up here. Let's go up here and let's call it. And the way we call it is by using the name of the function, run clock, and then parentheses. And we can put a value in there, but this particular function doesn't require a value, so we want to leave that empty so it matches this function. And then we do a semicolon. So that's the whole call, is the name of the function, parentheses, and semicolon. And this function is not returning anything, so there's nothing that we have to store or to use. We're just simply calling it. So let's go ahead and save that and refresh. And there, now it's back to calling those functions. It has the current date and the number of days, hours, minutes, and seconds until New Year's. Before we end, I want to mention one other thing. Notice how we've called this function before the function definition. And this is allowed in JavaScript. JavaScript will look forward to find that function. So not all languages will let you do that, but we're doing the call before the function definition, and that is allowed in JavaScript.